touch anything. Make sure that window stays open.
I'm Caleb Gilkerson with Central Divers, located out of Pierce, South Dakota. We conducted a video inspection here of the Lower Brule City intake on December 13th, 2012. We're starting out on the screen on the intake itself, which is a T-style. Looks like it's got a micro mesh screen on it. The flange here appears to be put together correctly with all the bolts in, all the nuts on. Everything appears to be tight. And then on the right side of the screen, you've got the cement cradle with one strap that actually fastens the intake itself down just before it meets the flange on the HDB pipe running into shore. The intake lies with 17 feet of water from the bottom of the intake to the top. That puts us right around a depth of 20 foot at the elevation normal. Now as we go around the intake, you can see on the cement pad there's gravel. This gravel is dispersed, appears to be dispersed on all sides of the intake. While we're running at a depth here of between 17 and 19 feet, you can see we still do have some ambient light coming through, some of the natural light. The ROV, the remote operated vehicle, is also equipped with two intense halogen bulbs that are adjustable so that we can try to find the right light. You can see in the water all the little floaties going by. That's mainly zooplankton and algae and other things, which all comes together to create poor visibility. Also, the ROV operator is contending with a little bit of surge, especially as we make our way shallow towards shore. That surge will become more evident in the video. Now, the length of this pipe also has us doing what's called live boating. That means our boat is following the ROV. Now, here's the airline. You can see there's still some duct tape left, probably like a flange cover. And then look at the flange here. The nuts on the left side appear to be have washers built out to them because of the nuts don't have a thread far enough. They're not all thread nuts. I would believe that that flange isn't tight. It appears to not be tight anyways. And then with the improper bolts, it appears that it may need a closer look, more inspection. At this time, we would strongly advise not running air, not putting air into the system. If any of that air does manage to make its way back uphill, that pipe could become buoyant and go to the surface. Now here you're just looking at one of a half strap with an anchor block on it, like a cement anchor block. That isn't attached. It's just laying here on the bottom. As soon as the diver touches down, just the motion of them stepping on the bottom will make what you can see now impossible. And for any work done on this intake is going to need to be done in zero visibility, all by feel. Here again you can see another flange on the airline that appears to be loose with the wrong bolts. There's also several ropes, like what you can see now, along the pipe from shore out to the intake that are not attached to anything. These can pose a hazard for a diver just because he's working in zero visibility, and anytime you have a rope that's fastened on another end, it's an entanglement hazard. Now this video is a total of 49 minutes. I won't narrate through the entire video, but what I'm giving you here is 49-minute clip. That's basically from the time we began inspecting at the intake, as shallow as we could get in towards shore, which was about 7 foot. The wave action was around 2 to 3 foot that day, so it made operating in December conditions interesting. You can see the intake the intake's pipe in front of you now with the airline on the right side of the screen. We're now following the top of that pipe towards shore. And you can see we go a good distance before we encounter any form of an anchor, and this one is not attached. Now this first anchor on the right side screen that's attached to the airline's pipe is actually just tied on with some rope. So that would be what I'd consider a temporary anchor. And then the next couple are not attached at all. So we make our way towards shore. We come across another, what appears to be a failed attempt at attaching the anchor. There's an anchor that's attached. And now you can see both pipes here. It actually looks like they're in a ditch that's been dug. But the bottom here is so soft that these pipes have just simply settled in, and through very limited movement have actually created the bottom profile that you're seeing now. You even have a complete ridge of sediment in between the two pipes in areas. There again is another anchor that's not attached. It's just a part of one. Now we're going to continue making our way towards shore, running what is generally a southwest direction from the intake towards shore. We'll encounter several of these anchors that don't appear to be attached, but they may be actually doubled and completed underneath in the mud. If that's the case with those, then I would suspect they were actually assembled before the pipe was lowered. I believe most of these were. Now what we see being a much better solution for this pipe that really, I'm sure if all the calculations were done, this pipe's not very negative. And with the airline introducing air at the intake, if any of that air was to flow back up the pipe, as it rises, it would expand, so it would be a kind of a chain reaction where it would begin to displace the water inside, making the pipe positive, bringing that pipe to the surface. As the pipe would rise to the surface, there would more than likely be issues that would result of that, with the intake moving off of the pad, or could even have a damaged or broken pipe or flange. In order to counter that, part of our proposal would be to actually come through and we would lift the pipe off of the bottom, and then we would encase it in the cement culvert pipes that are cut in half, placed over underneath and then over the top and then banded. And this could be done just once every 100 feet with one of those cement culverts. And then as we near the end, reduce them. On the intake itself, with that gravel the way that it is, we think the best solution for keeping that intake on the cement pad and keep that from settling into the bottom over time, because as you can see here, this bottom is very, very soft, and that will continue to settle. What we'd recommend is actually lifting the intake up and then coming in and placing between 4 and 6 large steel plates on the bottom, and then we would weld those steel plates together and make a big platform, like a real big footprint for that cement intake stand to set on, therefore helping float it on top of the mud, basically, on top of the bottom, and really extend the life of it. With the amount of growth that we're seeing on around that intake out in 17 to 20 foot of water, it would appear you have high oxygen there, so you're going to have good plant growth, and perhaps running the air will help break up some of that that plugs the screen over time. Definitely saving on the maintenance. Now we'll continue to follow the bottom here for about the next 6-7 minutes, and then I'll come back on and we'll see where the intake's pipe is actually coming off of the bottom.
What's up?
We're on the second foot.
Still recording. Yeah, there's a lot of blocks not connected.
Now, if you notice there in the sand, there's ripples, there's ridges running on the bottom of this trench that it's creating. And those are actually a result of wave action. So we know now that we're in a depth where you've got good plant growth, you've got wave action, so you actually do have some surge on the bottom. And what we're going to see as a result of that as we continue to get closer to shore, where these intakes bands are starting to actually slip and move. And so if you watch where those bands are on there now, you'll start seeing them where the plastics actually, the black is back because it scraped away the organic material. Which means we have movement on our pipe system in this area. Now we're actually starting to come into a point where the pipe is beginning to rise. It's beginning to lift off of the bottom. Even though there's a trench there, we have active movement in this area. As you can tell in the video, up until this point, we haven't had a whole lot of negative weight on there. We don't have much ballast on this buoyant pipe. But here now it's off of the bottom. And so as we get closer, what we're going to find, here's a bolt just lying on the bottom. As we get closer up here, we're going to find that the pipe's actually being supported on top of the old intake stand, on the old intake's cradle. The upcoming band is going to show quite a bit of movement. If you look on the right side of your screen, there at the top, did you see all the black that was wiped away? And you can see it here on the bottom pipe also. And this nut appears to be on, but a finger tight. It's a very soft bottom. You can see how just the ROV blew up quite a little dust cloud. And we're starting to get into some more surge action, so the ROV is getting a little trickier to control. Here we have a couple anchors that have condensed into one spot. They've moved quite some ways to get to this point. They're just gently resting on the bottom. Now we're starting to come up on the intakes cradle. Here's part of it. So here's the old intake cement cradle, and the new intake's pipe is actually running. You can see they're almost in the center of it, but not quite. Well, the pipe being off the bottom here like it is for such a long distance and elevated to a perfect height for catching anchors, and also for any timber that drifts down the river, particularly with the north wind, runs a risk of actually catching the pipe now and doing some serious damage. We found it's always best when the pipe is allowed to be on the bottom. In fact, once it becomes part of the bottom, perfect.
You're gonna have to assist me. I don't know where it's at. Probably already in.
Now you can hear the crew also while they're running the ROV. You'll hear their chatter once in a while.
Oh, I see it. Did we go on the upstream side or the downstream? Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
keep in mind they're on the surface with the 38-foot boat in weather conditions and trying to actually follow this ROV, which has a tether line going back to it. This is a fairly difficult or challenging ROV inspection to do all in one solid shot. The old intake appears to have had an airline that was ran to it also. And there's a rope that is tied to it that goes to a float of sorts at the surface.
Do I have any slack or? Oh, it's a lot of current or something. Can't get a good look at this fucking thing.
Here you got a rope that's attached to that float at the surface, and you can see the rope's got movement. Now just there to the right, you could also see that the old intake's pipe actually is already in the sediment. So from the old intake stand, it only runs about 2 feet, and then it's inside the mud. So we're actually running right on top of the old one at this point, almost parallel. In order to pull this pipe away from that structure and actually get it back to the bottom is going to take some work. Demolishing the stand would take an awful lot of work, and you still have it running right next to the old pipe. Now you can see it almost appears like the pipe is supposed to be elevated off of the bottom, like that's engineered into it. Now after talking with Terry, it doesn't sound that it was supposed to be that way. Now here's a whole bunch of anchors that appear to have kind of followed gravity and have all stacked up as this pipe now begins to run back to the bottom. Now video is going to become more challenging for Ben as he operates in this shallower water. He's getting into more surge, and they're going to do the best they can, but it's really more in of the same, where it's just a continuation of the intake line as it meets the bottom and gets into real soft sediment. Now the best time to resolve any of these potential problems, like not having enough ballast on the pipe, or the intake stand itself not having a large enough footprint, or this area pipe where it runs up off the bottom, there's several options, and we would like to go over those with you in detail. Okay, I'm going to leave you now. The video will carry on for about another 6 or 7 minutes. you'll see that there's some anchors that are still left on the bottom, like you just seen there with an eyelet on them, and then there's others that are attached in this fashion. The pipe is back on the bottom and it's forming its own trench. You can reach me at 605-224-6572 or on my cell phone 605-222-4149. This is Caleb with Central Divers in Pierce, South Dakota.
just about done. Put me on my nose. What's going on here? Do I have any slack? Whoa! Whoa! I'm good. I just got a jerk. That's what brought me to the video.
Back to the shore.
Yeah.
Fully exposed.
Yeah. Well, here and there. Been hard to control.
You're zipping around. So we're going. Should I stop it? Ben?